"You're not a real man, you're just a walking ATM." My sister's husband laughed as he used my car. Everyone laughed along with him. I let out a short laugh myself, nodded, and left without another word. 3 days later he was screaming on the phone. "I never thought I'd be writing this, but last night changed everything." You know those moments when something small finally breaks the camel's back? Yeah, this wasn't one of those. This was the moment I watched my brother-in-law Ryan slide into the driver's seat of my brand new Tesla, which I hadn't even given him permission to drive. He turned to my sister Sarah and loudly announced, "See, I told you Ethan would let me borrow it. He always does. He's not a real man anyway, just a walking ATM." And everyone laughed. My mother, Helen, my sister, my cousins, all of them, laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd heard all year. Some context: I've always been the successful one in the family. Not bragging, just stating facts. While Ryan jumped from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, I built my career steadily. My sister Sarah, despite her master's degree, chose to support his entrepreneurial spirit instead of pursuing her own path. Over the past 5 years, Ryan has borrowed my previous car and returned it with a mysterious dent he knew nothing about, asked for 6 temporary loans totaling $47,000 that were never repaid, used my vacation home for his business retreats, translation parties that resulted in $112,000 worth of damages, maxed out an emergency credit card I foolishly co-signed for, and convinced my mother to refinance her house to invest in his latest venture. Each time it's the same story. "Come on, Ethan, we're family. Don't be so uptight, it's just money. You're Sarah's favorite, you don't even have kids. What else are you spending it on?" But last night was different. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner at my mother's house. I'd driven there in my new Tesla, the first really expensive thing I'd bought for myself in years. I hadn't even shown it to anyone yet, wanting to avoid the inevitable request to just try it out. I was in the kitchen helping Mom when I heard the distinctive sound of my car's door opening. By the time I got outside, Ryan was already adjusting the seats with Sarah in the passenger side, both of them grinning like teenagers who'd stolen the keys to Dad's car. "Ryan, get out of my car." "Relax, bro. Just taking it for a quick spin to show Sarah. You know, I've been thinking about getting one myself," he said, and that's when he made the ATM comment. They all laughed. I stood there watching my brother-in-law sitting in my $95,000 car that he hadn't even asked to use, making jokes about me being less of a man. Something inside me just clicked. While my own family laughed along, something inside me just clicked. I smiled, nodded, walked back inside, grabbed my jacket and called a rideshare. As I left, I heard my mother calling after me, "Ethan, where are you going? Don't be so sensitive." I didn't answer. Instead, I spent the next 3 hours making calls, sending emails, and taking back control of what was mine. By midnight, I had reported my car as being used without authorization, contacted my bank about every loan and transaction tied to Ryan, emailed my lawyer about the damage to my vacation home, and changed every password and security code I had. I froze the credit card I had foolishly co-signed. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and messages. Ryan was stranded at a charging station because I had remotely disabled his access. He wasn't laughing now. Sarah was furious, calling me selfish for ruining their plans, and Mom tried to guilt-trip me about tearing the family apart. The weight of their words didn't even faze me. I was done being the family ATM. My phone buzzes again as I type this. It's Ryan's number. I think I'll let it ring. Here's what they don't understand. I'm not angry. I'm not even hurt anymore. I'm just done. And sometimes, being done is the most powerful thing you can be. I have a meeting with my lawyer tomorrow morning. I've documented everything. Every call. Every transaction. Every lie. Every misstep. They wanted to use me like an ATM? Well, this ATM just went permanently out of service. Reddit update 1. First, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my last post. You were right, I should have done this years ago. Here's what's happened in the last 24 hours. The morning after the ATM incident, I met with my lawyer. I brought everything, every text, every email, every bank statement, and photos of the damages to my properties. She just kept shaking her head as she sifted through the evidence. The total came to $162,800 in unauthorized charges. But here's where it gets interesting. While I was sitting in that meeting, Ryan showed up at my house. My surveillance cameras caught him trying to use his spare key, a key I'd already had changed. He stood there for 20 minutes calling and texting. Some highlights from his messages: "Stop being dramatic, your sister is crying because of you. Mom says you're acting like a child." And, "Just reset the Tesla access. I need to get to a meeting." I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I was busy with my lawyer, drafting formal demand letters for repayment and filing reports for the property damage at my vacation house. No charges yet, but I was establishing a paper trail. Then Lily, My girlfriend suggested something brilliant. Check my credit report. Turns out there were 3 credit cards I didn't recognize. All maxed out. All opened in the past year with my name as a co-signer. Guess who had access to my social security number and personal documents? Ryan had helped me with my taxes last year. That's when things really escalated. Around 2 p.m. Sarah started calling everyone in the family. According to my cousin, she was telling people I had lost my mind and was destroying the family over a joke. She conveniently left out the part about the 3 maxed out credit cards or the $162,000 in damages. Helen showed up at my office crying, saying, "I didn't raise you to be cruel to family." I asked her about the $85,000 second mortgage she took out on her house to invest in Ryan's latest opportunity. She got quiet real fast. "But he promised it would triple in value," she whispered. "And you believed him again?" I asked. She left without another word. By evening, the family group chat was on fire. Apparently, I was now heartless, cruel, jealous of Ryan's potential, having a midlife crisis, and needed to man up and help the family. It was all the same twisted narrative, but this time something in me was different. Then Lily found something else. "Remember those business retreats at my vacation house?" It turns out Ryan had been renting it out on a vacation rental site. For 2 years. Pocketing the money, using my property to run his business, all without my knowledge or consent. That's when his tone shifted. The messages, once dripping with anger, now became frantic and panicked. "Look, we can work something out. Please don't dig into the vacation house thing. I can explain everything. Just call me back." But I didn't. Instead, I froze all joint accounts, canceled every subscription they had access to, changed all my passwords, and reported the fraudulent credit cards. I had my lawyer draft a complete record of all loans and damages, then filed reports about the unauthorized rental of my property. As I clicked send on the last email to the authorities, my phone buzzed with a new notification, Ryan's number flashing on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't answer. The silence on the other side of the line was deafening. But that silence was shattered moments later when a new message came through. "You're making a huge mistake. I'll make sure you regret this." The coldness of his words sent a chill down my spine. The stakes had just been raised. That's when I received a text from Sarah that made everything click into place. "How could you do this to us? We're about to close on our dream house. The bank needs to verify our income and assets. Please don't ruin this for us." So that's what this was about. They needed my financials to look good for their loan application. The Tesla joyride, the ATM comments. Those were just their frustrations because I wasn't playing along with their plan. My lawyer confirmed what they were trying to do would constitute mortgage fraud. She's drafting a letter to their loan officer, ensuring accuracy by including proof of their actual debts to me, just to prevent any manipulation of the application. Not long ago, Ryan left a voicemail, his voice barely coherent, but I could make out, "You have no idea what you've done. No idea what's going to come out if you keep pushing." Is that a threat or a confession? Guess we'll find out. The truth is, I'm not pushing anything. I'm just letting go of the rope in this endless tug of war. They're the ones who are sinking in the mud of their own making. Then the security company alerted me that someone was at my vacation property. The surveillance cameras showed Ryan's car. Reddit update 2. Well, it turns out Ryan's threat about what might come out wasn't just hot air. The last 48 hours have been a revelation. When I last posted, Ryan was at my vacation property. The surveillance cameras showed him removing boxes from the garage at 11 p.m. I called the police for a trespassing report, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. But as I reviewed the footage again, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Ryan wasn't just taking things, he was planting something in my garage. The realization hit me like a freight train. What had he set up? And why? The urgency in my voice as I called the police was palpable. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about keeping my family's safety intact. What he left behind, though, was far more intriguing than what he took. Hidden in the back of a storage cabinet were piles of documents, bank statements, loan applications, and business proposals, each one bearing my forged signature. But that wasn't even the worst part. Among the documents, there were also records belonging to 3 other families, all following the same twisted pattern: borrowed money, forged signatures, elaborate investment schemes. It wasn't just me he had been scamming. Ryan had been running this game on multiple relatives across multiple families. He knew exactly how to play them. I handed everything over to my lawyer, who was already in contact with the other families involved. The next morning, Sarah showed up at my office, but not to apologize. No, that would be too easy. She came to inform me that she'd posted a long-winded truth about my brother's story on social media, calling me a vindictive sociopath who was destroying her family out of jealousy. Her post went viral, circulating through our extended family, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years began calling me. But here's the thing about family secrets. Once they're aired out, you lose control over which ones come to the surface. My mother's sister called me. Is it true about the vacation house rentals? She asked. Yes, I replied. Well, you should know, he did the same thing with Uncle John's lake house last summer. One phone call led to another and the dominoes began to fall. 3 other relatives had loaned him money. He'd used my mother's house as collateral for a private loan. He'd been running unauthorized rentals on 2 other family properties. He'd borrowed and sold family heirlooms, promising to replace them with better ones once his investments matured. The web of deceit was spinning wider and faster than I could have imagined. By mid-afternoon my mother Helen called. Her voice was different, soft, trembling, fearful. The bank called, she said. They say the paperwork for the second mortgage might be incorrect. You mean forged? I replied, the silence on the line louder than any words could ever be. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I really thought he said it was just a formality, that he'd pay it off before. Her words trailed off and for the first time I saw her cry. The sobs were quiet, almost reluctant, as if she were too proud to fully give in to them. I didn't feel the need to comfort her. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Lily stayed with me through it all, her presence a steadying force. It was she who noticed something strange about the timestamps on Ryan's rental listings. They didn't match his supposed business trip dates. A quick check revealed the unsettling truth. He'd been renting out my place while simultaneously claiming to be using it himself. Double-dipping. Pocketing both streams of money. Around 7 p.m. Sarah called, her voice frantic like a dam had broken inside her. What did you do? She screamed. The bank pulled our mortgage approval. They're saying something about a fraud investigation. This was our dream house, Ethan, how could you? I paused, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like an icy storm. I didn't do anything, Sarah. Your husband's actions did this. He was trying to build something for us, for our future, by stealing from the family. I took a breath, steadying myself. He said he would fix everything. Once what? Once his imaginary investments paid off. Once he scammed enough people. The line went dead. She hung up. Then came the intervention. They all showed up at my house. Mom, Sarah, 2 uncles and an aunt. They wanted to talk this through, to keep it within the family. I let them in wordlessly. I sat them down and without a word I played the security camera footage of Ryan stealing from my garage. I showed them the forged documents, the rental listings, the loan applications, the evidence of other families he'd scammed. One by one their faces drained of color. The room fell deathly silent. Finally Helen stood up, shaking. I need to call my bank, she said, her voice hollow. She left without another word, and the others followed her, retreating to the world where this never existed. All that remained was Sarah. She sat there, her eyes glued to the documents in front of her face a mask of confusion and disbelief. There has to be an explanation, she muttered, almost pleading. He wouldn't. That's when her phone rang. Ryan's face lit up on the screen. She answered without hinking, the urgency in his voice cutting through the silence. Babe, don't go home, he said, his tone desperate. They're here. The other families, all of them, stood in my house alongside the police, their eyes filled with disbelief. Sarah looked at me. Really looked at me. It was as if she was seeing me for the first time in years, like the veil had lifted, and the truth was finally making its way to the surface. But instead of confronting me, she simply stood up, turned and walked out. No words. No explanation. Just the hollow sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence between us. My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. An unknown number. The last text from Ryan blinked on the screen. I can explain everything. Just give me one chance, please. They're going to take everything. I let it ring. I didn't answer. Because sometimes, letting the silence speak is the most powerful response. Reddit update, it's done. All of it. And truth? Truth really is stranger than fiction. Remember that unknown number calling me? It wasn't Ryan. It was another victim's son. Let's call him James. What I learned shattered everything I thought I knew. Ryan had swindled his elderly parents, taking their entire $230,000 retirement savings, draining their nest egg into a foolproof investment scheme that existed only in his lies. But James wasn't the only one. He did some digging of his own and uncovered the same pattern. 5 other families, 5 more sets of broken promises. Ryan had swindled over $1.2 million from relatives and friends alike. But here's the real kicker. Ryan wasn't losing this money in failed investments. No. He was living a double life. A hidden life. Another house. Another family. 2 kids. And for years no one knew, not Sarah, not anyone. He had been funding this second life with the stolen money from our families. A life built on deceit. When I received this, the floodgates opened. I made sure every single piece of evidence reached the authorities. Every forged signature, every phony business proposal, every conversation recorded in the shadows. The truth, the ugly truth, came crashing down on Tuesday morning, tearing through everything Ryan had so carefully woven together. By Tuesday afternoon, Ryan's entire house of cards collapsed, and both of his lives came crashing down in a spectacularly synchronized collapse. His other wife showed up at his and Sarah's house. This was how my sister found out. Not from him. Not from me. But from the other woman standing on their front lawn, screaming about stolen college funds and drained bank accounts. The air was thick with the weight of that revelation. My mother, Helen, tried one last time to fix things, to stitch the fraying edges of a family that had already unraveled. She called a family meeting at her house. Everyone came. The victims, their families, both wives, even some of Ryan's former business associates. Ryan showed up too, his smirk still in place, his arrogance unwavering, convinced he could talk his way out of it all. I can explain everything, he began, his voice oozing with false confidence. This is all just a big misunderstanding. But I had had enough. I stood up, connected my laptop to the TV and hit play. The vacation home security footage filled the screen. There he was, showing potential. Investors around claiming it was his property. Then footage of him slipping cash into his pockets, greed in its purest form. But the final blow came when I played the clip of him admitting to another scam victim that this had all been part of a long game. The smirk on his face finally vanished, replaced by the cold truth of his lies. By Friday, 7 families had pressed charges. The bank had launched a fraud investigation into the mortgage applications. His real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Both houses were being seized and both wives had filed for divorce. Then Sarah broke her silence. She sent me a text. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I should have seen it. I'm sorry, she said, her voice quivering. Too little, too late. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. My mother lost her house, the one I grew up in. The bank had foreclosed on it due to the fraudulent second mortgage Ryan had convinced her to sign. She's moving in with my aunt next week. I should have listened to you, she said as I helped her pack, her hands shaking with the weight of her mistakes. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. I had spent so many years defending Ryan, trying to see the good in him, blind to the damage he was doing to our family. But now the truth was unavoidable. He wasn't just a man with flawed decisions. He was a predator, a master manipulator who had used our love against us. The sting of realization hit me like a freight train, but it was too late. Some realizations come too late to matter, and this one too would remain forever etched in my memory. The final nail in the coffin was yet to come. Remember those boxes Ryan had removed from my vacation home? They contained evidence of something even more monstrous. Inside there were more fake documents, more forged signatures, and a whole new round of scams he had been preparing, plans to manipulate and deceive more people, more families. He hadn't just ruined us, he was ready to ruin others too. I made sure every investigator received copies of the documents. I wasn't going to let him escape this time. Yesterday, Ryan was arrested, not for the family scams which are still under investigation, but for attempting to flee the country with stolen funds. They caught him at the airport trying to board a flight with $50,000 in cash and a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. The walking ATM had finally shut down permanently. His empire of lies, built on our backs, had crumbled. Mila and I are getting married next spring. The ceremony will be at my vacation home, the same one Ryan used to scam people. Somehow it feels fitting, like reclaiming what was stolen, like standing tall after all the years of being used and drained. Sarah won't be invited. Neither will my mother. Some bridges once burned should stay ashes. I've learned that the hard way. Ryan is facing up to 15 years in prison. Both his wives are testifying against him, exposing the depth of his lies. Every family he scammed is filing civil suits. His assets are frozen. His reputation is destroyed. The man who once used his charm to manipulate and control is now nothing more than a shadow of his former self, lost in the wreckage of his own deceit. As for me, I'm done. Done being anyone's ATM. The bank is permanently closed. I'm not the same person I was when this all began. I've learned that sometimes you have to walk away from the people who are meant to be family. And sometimes the hardest thing is to let go of the ties that bind you to them. But I'm free now, free to move on, free to build the life I deserve. No more lies, no more deceit. It's time to build a future with people who truly care, with Mila by my side. I'm done being anyone's ATM. The bank is permanently closed. So after everything that's happened, I've cut ties with Ryan and Sarah. I've taken control of my life, but the scars are still there. I'm rebuilding, but it's hard to shake the feeling that I could have done things differently. /asshole and r/relationship advice. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you try to salvage the relationship with your family, or is it better to just walk away for good? I'd love to hear your thoughts and advice.